defense is trying to go, you get caught with a holding penalty.
The dangerous Aaron Cruikshank, maybe his first shot here to return a punt.
Here comes the ready or not. Here comes the boys from the south. Here comes the ready or not. How you like me now? I say, here comes the boom, ready or not. Here comes the boys from the south. Boom, here comes the boom, ready or not. How you like me now?
Welcome back to another episode of Tackling the Terps, presented by WMUC Sports. I'm Daniel Stein, that's Ryan Martin. And Ryan, a loss 27-24 on Saturday. Really tough outing for the Terps.
Yeah, just a heartbreaker for Maryland, who was up 7 points late into this contest. A game Maryland was expected to win, about 10-point favorites. The Terps were over the Spartans. This really reeks of that Illinois loss last year at CQ Stadium. Now back at the Shell, and Maryland loses this one by only 3 points to Michigan State. Again, it's that last-second field goal right when time's expiring that wins it for the visitors, and Maryland now 1-1 on the season.
Let's hear how it sounded from our guys at WMUC Sports. This was Nate Schwartz and Ben Strober on the call last Saturday.
It's the start of week 2 in the college football season, and it's the start of Big Ten play here in 2024 as the Michigan State Spartans come to College Park to take on the Maryland Terrapins. Thanks so much for joining us here on WMUC Sports alongside Ben Strober. I'm Nathan Schwartz. Now Felton back into the game. He's in the slot to the left side. Prather, the wide receiver. Edwards in the shotgun. Hemby to his left. Edwards taking another shot to the end zone. Felton creates separation. He hauls it in. Did he get both feet in? Yes, he did. It's a Maryland touchdown. What a start to the season for Ty Felton. He had 2 touchdowns a week ago against UConn, and on this double-digit play drive for Maryland, it's Edwards to Felton once again as Maryland takes a 6-0 lead. Childs in the shotgun, takes the snap, looking to the end zone, throws it. It's Foster. It's a Michigan State touchdown. What a drive by the Spartans, and what a response to the start by Maryland. It's Childs to Foster for 6. Twins to the left for Michigan State. One receiver on the right side for the Spartans formation on 3rd and 9. Carter remains the back to the right of Childs. Childs takes the snap, has all day to throw, throws across the middle. It's intercepted. It's Glendon Miller at the 40, past the 30 to the 20, and he takes it out of bounds at the Michigan State 18. Hemby, the deep back, in the pistol. Edwards keeps initially. He's going to head for the pylon. He dives and he's in. Touchdown, Maryland. The zone read for Billy Edwards Jr. He picks up his first touchdown on the ground in 2024 as that Glendon Miller interception and the Edwards touchdown gives Maryland the lead back.
Childs takes the snap, drops back under heavy pressure, throws it over the middle, looks for the end zone. It's reeled in by Glover. Touchdown, Michigan State. No catches last week. He's got 2 today, and he's got a touchdown with just over 10 to go in the first half. It's 14-13 Maryland.
Takes the snap, 3-step drop. He's got all day to throw. He's going to take a shot to the end zone. It's Husky for Maryland in the end zone making the interception. Jalen Husky got beat for a touchdown earlier. McPherson with the hold. Howes with the kick. It's drifting left, and it is good. Despite that delay of game penalty, Jack Howes connects one through the post.
Takes the snap, fakes the handoff to Ray. Looks left, fires, floats it. Octavian Smith reels it in. Touchdown! And it's Dylan Wade that reels that one in. Mixed up 5 for 0. Wade's first touchdown makes it 23-17 Maryland. Childs calls for the snap. He gets it. Under pressure, ball knocked loose into the hands of the Maryland defense. And the Terps force another turnover. It's Glendon Miller who comes up with the football. Here's the snap. It's down. House kick away from 42. It's up. And he missed it wide right. Unbelievable. With 4:22 to go. Childs takes the snap, fakes the handoff to Carter, drops back in the pocket, lofts it deep, looks for Marsh. He reels it in at the 30. One man to beat, streaks down the right side of the sideline. He's in. Touchdown. One play, 77 yards. Game tied 24-24. Here's the snap. It's high. The hold's down. The kick is up. It is good. With 1 tick remaining, Jonathan Kim sends it through. Michigan State grabs the lead.
So there you have it. Ben Schrover, Nathan Schwartz on the call for that game. It's a set 27-24 loss for Maryland against Michigan State. Ryan Martin back here with Daniel Stein for Tackling the Terps. And Daniel, when we look into this game, there's a lot of fingers that could be pointed. Is it the defense who allowed some of those big touchdown passes we just saw Ben and Nate call? One thing that I was looking at a little bit, some coaching decisions. Late in the fourth quarter, we're under 5 minutes here, and head coach Michael Locksley elects to go for a long field goal instead of a 4th and yardage situation. That was Billy Edwards' bread and butter last year. Those short yardage situations, go for a run. Your thoughts on that play and the decision to try and kick a long field goal that was unsuccessful?
You know, Ryan, at the time, I actually didn't think it was that bad of a call. And by that bad, I really don't think it was a bad call. I was sitting there in the stand saying, it's okay, we need the points, take the points, especially with Jack Howes, who's been a good kicker for us. And so I was disappointed that he missed the field goal, and especially by that margin, too. He basically shaved the upright there. But I think the theme of the game really was just we had opportunities, whether we earned them ourselves or Michigan State gave them to us, and we just couldn't convert, and that's why we lost.
Yeah, I think when you go back to that play again, so Billy Edwards, one thing that was in the back of my mind, Daniel, with that decision and thinking about it in post is Edwards took a lot of hits against UConn. Obviously didn't see the full game action, but he was running around a lot, being the same Billy that we saw last year, maybe when he'd come in and run the ball more times than he'd throw the ball. So I like the decision to protect Billy in that way and kick the field goal. As you mentioned, again, that's Jack Howes' first missed field goal on the season, a guy who's been reliable and clearly had that job coming in. So I like protecting Billy. It shows me that there's maybe not a Billy Edwards Jr. for this year and a guy who can just come in and do a quarterback sneak. But I'd like to see a little bit more aggressiveness. I'll play devil's advocate to what I just said. Aggressiveness, you're at the Shell against your home fans in the Big Ten opener. We're going to kick a field goal there. I know any kind of score would put you up by 2 scores, but I think that's an area where you got Roman Hemby, one of the best running backs that we've seen in this Mike Locksley era. I'd like to see him get a little bit more involved in this game and beyond. So still questioning that decision, but hindsight is 20/20 with this.
Yeah, definitely a more conservative play call for sure. Now, let's see what head coach Mike Locksley as well as Billy Edwards Jr. had to say about the game.
Season. I mean, to take a loss this early against, again, a team, Michigan State, I said that we gave it away. You know what? They took it. They took the victory because they made the plays. That quarterback made some big throws. He made the plays when they needed to be made, and we didn't. And so one of the things that I've talked to the team about is that, you know, strategy, you know, plus execution don't always equals results.
So, yeah, it's frustrating, but, you know, like I said, it's early in the season. We got to get it corrected, and we got to, you know, get the ship steering the right way for next week.
So, Ryan, a lot of things to unpack in that game, but one thing that really struck out to me was we talked about last week and how good the secondary has been both currently and historically for Maryland in the last couple of years. But against the Spartans, they got absolutely cooked, especially in the cornerback line and the safety line. We gave up multiple really long passes to these Michigan receivers. I was really disappointed in guys like Jalen Husky, who, even though he is a transfer, I mean, he brings plenty of experience coming over from Bowling Green. What did you see in the secondary?
Yeah, I think the issues in the secondary were really personified too. And again, this is something that we talked about at this couch last week, was you're going from a UConn offense, UConn wide receiver group, to just a really better Michigan State wide receiver group in this offense that the Spartans have here. So I don't think Maryland was ready for the bell. You mentioned Jaden Husky. They're a local kid coming back to Maryland after the transfer from Bowling Green. Had that interception, but don't let that fool you. I don't think this is a game that Husky would have wanted in his second game in a Maryland uniform. I think he just got burned on too many routes, especially when you look at the game that Nick Marsh, who had that 77-yard touchdown. He finishes with a Ty Felton stat line that we've seen the last 2 weeks. 8 catches for Marsh, 194 yards, and that 77-yard score. So he went off. I think Aiden Childs answered a lot of doubters this week, 363 yards on 3 touchdowns with the 3 interceptions. So Glendon Miller did his thing. He had the 2 interceptions. But when you look at Husky, when you look at Perry Fisher on the other side, the opposite corner, out wide, I really just don't think that they had the speed and intensity at home again to match the Michigan State wide receivers. So that was disappointing. And then, honestly, I'd like to see a little more from Dante Trader, too, a guy who's supposed to be a leader in that secondary. Didn't see Trader have too big of a game defensively with the statistics. So a lot to pick up on. I think a lot that you can build into against the UVA game now, especially starting with the secondary.
Yeah, and on Childs, I mean, you look at his stat line, he's got 24 completions of 39 attempts, 363 yards and 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions. I'm willing to say that I think only 2 of them were really his fault. I think the first one he definitely sailed, but the second one, I mean, he was being hit from the blind side. So, and Glendon Miller made a great play on the ball. He was right in front of it and caught it. Third one was definitely his fault. But again, Aiden Childs, you talk about a young guy in his first season really taking the reins of the offense, and especially all that talking he was doing before the game. I mean, Mike Locksley said in his press conference, we wanted to make Aiden Childs beat us with his arm, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah.
And so, credit where credit is due, even though he made the mistakes of his own. It's not easy to come into the shell, Maryland jumping out of the tunnel. I love the silence, carrying the flags and the fire and the cannons and all that, especially as a first-time starter like Childs was. Yeah. And he walked in and beat us basically at our own game. And so I think that credit is due where credit is due. When you look at the offense, though, Billy Edwards Jr., his stat line, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. I thought overall he played well, but I think there were little things that the Maryland offense couldn't do that really ended up costing them the game. Was that what you thought?
Yeah, I thought so too. I think you look at what Billy Edwards did. Another game with over 250 yards, had the 2 touchdowns. First interception we've seen Billy throw on the season. So again, I think you're getting adjusted to a Big Ten defense right here. What I'll do say is, one thing I mentioned last week, I didn't think that Billy was showing enough of the deep passes. He was airing it out here against Michigan State. I like that adjustment against going a better defense. You know that they're going to be in a lot of zone coverage, sitting short routes, especially before that first down marker. So I thought Billy adjusted really well. I like what we saw from Ty Felton. Again, we'll talk about him a lot. We're putting together a really special second consecutive game in a row to start the season. So I think this is a game which Billy's not the reason why Maryland lost this game. He's a team captain going into week 3, I think, for good reasons. So this is a good one to hang your hat on if you're a Billy Edwards Jr. supporter, because I think he did exactly what we were thinking he was going to do. He controlled the game similarly. The jump that you wanted to see going from UConn to Michigan State, he did it, I think, here.
Yeah, I think overall Billy's performance was pretty good. But again, I think in football, you have to take what the defense and the other team in general gives you. And when the defense still got 3 turnovers, and Locksley talked about that, how they won the turnover battle and they still lost the game. I mean, that's frustrating, especially Locksley, former defensive back. He's going to be more frustrated than anyone. I think that was part of it. I mean, we talked about last week how good Maryland's rushing attack was. They did break over 100 rushing yards combined with, the 6 guys that carried it, but still 37 yards for Roman Hemby, 24 yards for Ray Nolan. I think his touchdown in week 1 was a lot longer than 24 yards. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are guys that are really explosive in the open field that Maryland just couldn't really get cooking. And so you can't take this game and say, well, it was Billy's fault. Well, it was the play calling's fault. I think, at least from my perspective, I think that it's more about you need to adapt during the game and you need to understand why you're losing in the current spot and then adapt to that current play and execute at the end of the game, which Maryland just didn't do.
Yeah, I think when you look at that, I like what you brought up there about adapting. This was a Michigan State team that ended both halves with a big field goal from Jonathan Kim, a 50-yarder as time expired in the first half, and we all know about that 37-yarder that won things for the Spartans. So Maryland goes into the locker room at halftime, down 17-14. I don't think that's a position that the Terps thought they'd be in at that point. I agree that adapting in this game just wasn't what it needed to be. Again, this is still early September football. There's a lot of kinks to be working out with your new starting quarterback and this offense that's around him. But I do want to see a little bit more of that intensity come out for Maryland out of the gate. Terps 11 for 17 on third downs. I think that's a stat that you'll be fine with if you're Maryland fans. Again, it was good drives. I think sometimes the offense just stalled out, which is why we saw this Maryland team go from 50 points to 24 in this one. But yeah, I thought the offense did what they needed to do. Again, just those laps on defense as well.
Yeah. When you look at grading the game on an A to F scale, what did you have for this game?
So I had this game at a D+. You can't say how this is by far an underwhelming game. And there was conversations, I think, right after the game finished on Saturday, where does this loss rank in the Michael Locksley era at Maryland? I think it's up there with some of the early season disappointments. And this is a Maryland team that started 6-0 last year, Daniel. So they're not accustomed really, especially with the starters that they have here. They're not accustomed to losing this early in the season. and dropping these kind of heartbreakers and starting 1-1. So I think this is a D+ game. I think you have a good spot to bounce back against a UVA team who is willing to score high points. They scored 30 points at 2-0, but they've scored 30 in their last 2 games, so it could be a high-scoring battle. This could benefit a Maryland offense that's doing things that we don't necessarily think are the problem yet for the Terps.
I had this game at a D-. I'm not going to give it an F because, I've seen worse, but I gave it a D- because, sometimes a team goes out there and they just get shellacked. Like, they get absolutely blown out. But in this game, we had the expectations. We were doing plenty of talking. We were saying, this Aiden Childs kid, whatever, he's going to get destroyed. And they just couldn't execute. And it's also the way that they lost. It's these very small things. It's not, they did completely sell in the secondary, but it's not a matter of, the offense just completely, failed, or the defense completely failed. It was both of them doing these very small things wrong. And you mentioned the play call from Locksley in the fourth quarter. So I think for me, that's what bothers me more than, losing by 50 points or something, especially against a team that not only you beat last year, but you're now on your home turf and you want to beat again. I think that's why I gave it such a low grade. But I think that, like you said, UVA represents a real clear bounce back opportunity, even if it is on the road.
Yeah, I think, again, the Cavaliers going into Charlottesville, Maryland, favored in that game at the moment. So another ACC former rival that's there. And Daniel, if they're going to claim that win, bounce back and start their first 3 games 2-1, I think we need to see Ty Felton continue to produce. He's my offensive player of the week in this one. 11 catches for Felton, over 150 yards again, 152 yards. Scored that first touchdown as well, finding the back left corner, getting those toes in. So, Daniel, Ty Felton has been the premier piece of this offense so far. I think it was one thing for Felton to do it against the UConn secondary, but to look this good, have 11 catches against an in-conference rival with Michigan State, that's exactly what you want to see if you are Maryland offensively. Felton's my guy so far, and he's been doing it so far against Michigan State and UConn.
Yeah, Felton just continues to impress me. Going into the season, I really did think Caden Prather would be a bigger receiver, or at least it would be a little more balanced. But again, Felton's performances have been great, and the fact that he continues to do this against a Big Ten a Big Ten opponent, I should say, just proves that he's got some dog in him for sure. Our defensive player of the week was Glendon Miller. 2 interceptions. I mean, you can say, Aiden Childs, overthrew the first one. That's why he had it. But again, stats are stats. And I think even though the secondary did get burnt, I think he's been a bright spot so far because ball hawking is a very important part of that position group. And so for that reason, I think if he can just keep that momentum going, he'll eventually uplift his fellow defensive backs. And so that's why he was my defensive player of the week.
Yeah, 3 interceptions through 2 games. You're talking about being a dog defensively. I think Miller was barking all over the field in this one. So
exactly.
2 picks, including the one right there at the line of scrimmage. Right place, right time for Miller. But I'm talking about being a dog making those picks. How about you getting the touchdown predictor correct? Dylan Wade scoring his first touchdown of the season. Well done on that one, my friend.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not going to say it was random because it wasn't, all right? It wasn't. But I just had the feeling the way they were using him in the first game, I thought they were going to keep using him. And he didn't have many more catches in that game. But I'm looking on this here. I think he only had
3 others, yeah.
Yeah, okay, he had 4 catches. But, what can I say? I don't know.
Certified ball knower here, Daniel Stein.
Certified ball knower, yep.
So Maryland loses this one to Michigan State 27-24. A close game in which Maryland drops, and you look around the Big Ten, Daniel, 3 teams at Maryland is going to play soon. Penn State, Oregon, those games are coming up. Both those Big Ten teams ranked, but there was close calls for them. Penn State pulls out a close one to Bowling Green. Oregon pulls out a close victory as well, that one to Boise State. So 2 teams that Maryland's going to play that are ranked. They had some shaky starts. And you see there Northwestern losing in double overtime in Evanston to the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, I mean, just goes to show the Big Ten football arena can be pretty unpredictable sometimes. And I know they're not playing them this year, Ryan, but also Michigan. They got absolutely scorched on their home turf. Texas, a team from the South, they can't play in cold weather. It's not that cold yet. They walked into the Big House, one of the hardest places to play into in the country, and they completely took down the Michigan squad. But like you said, Penn State and Oregon, I mean, these are 2 teams that people are saying should really be winning the conference. And, I know Boise State's a good team, but, when you're the Ducks and you have Dylan Gabriel, who's a Heisman contender, I mean, going really close with a team like Boise State, it's got to make them a little nervous.
Yeah, you take a look around, especially with that new AP Top 25 poll that just dropped. Penn State will stick at 8. Oregon dropped 2 spots to 9. And Michigan, as you mentioned, losing that game 31-12 to Texas. Again, a Longhorns team that's a top 3 or 4 team in the country right now, but Michigan falling all the way down to 17 in the AP polls. Still a very highly contested Big Ten conference right here, but you do have to like to see that if you're a Maryland fan, especially keeping it so close to Michigan last year at the Shell. But right now, it's that championship drought right now for the Wolverines.
When you look ahead to next week for the Terps, UVA on the road. This is a big rivalry game.
Yep.
I mean, in every sport, really. We just had a big soccer game, a Maryland UVA that was a hard-fought draw. What is one thing you are looking for in that game from either side of the ball for Maryland?
Yeah, I'm focusing on the defense in this game. So again, as I was talking about earlier, this is a 2-0 Cavaliers team that is wins, just beat Wake Forest. They beat Richmond as well. Wake Forest, they put up 31. Richmond, they put up 34. So this is a Virginia team that can score a lot, and they can score through their sophomore quarterback. It's Anthony Colandrea. We saw him last year at the Shell where Maryland beat Virginia. So how does a secondary, Daniel, bounce back against this offense that's been so potent so far through 2 games? I think this is a big test early, specifically for the Maryland defense.
Yeah, I think it starts with the defensive line. We really didn't have that much pressure. And again, Michigan State is a special case because as we saw on Saturday, Ryan, Aiden Childs really good in the pocket, really good at avoiding defenders coming at him. And we did get him a couple times. But again, I think that there needs to be a little more cohesion on defense. Everyone needs to work with each other more, where the defensive line needs to do their job so the secondary can do their job as well, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I'm going to be looking at just how the defensive line can get around these UVA offensive linemen. And I think the more pressure we get on their young quarterback, the better we're going to do as a whole.
Yeah, Maryland, again, that was that Friday night game, the blackout. We saw the big punt return touchdown. Terps win that one 42-14 coming in last September. So Maryland will try to keep it going against their former ACC rival. But again, the Terps, you mentioned that defense. 2 sacks for the first 2 games for Maryland, not what Quayshawn Fuller was back for this game against Michigan State. So with Fuller leading the charge, not really what Maryland wanted to see. So Daniel, when you look at this Virginia game, Maryland at Virginia, just what are your predictions? What do you think is going to happen coming up on Saturday?
Well, I think that what they're going to do, like they did in the first 2 games, they're going to get the ball to Ty Felt, and then they're going to do it early and often. Whether that's going to work or not, we're going to hope that it does. But I think in the meantime, they're definitely going to try to restart the run game a little bit. Maybe that means Billy Edwards is going to actually carry the ball on like a designed run more often. Maybe this means Locksley is going to be more aggressive on 4th down. But I think overall, we're going to see Maryland offensively continuing that aggression and defensively just trying to cover the long balls better. I think that's the biggest thing that Locks is going to impose on the secondary versus UVA.
Yeah, I could see something similar to that. Again, testing that secondary and seeing how it can go. We'll both give our score predictions. But first, here's Ruben Hyppolite talking about that game last year, Daniel, how much of an impact it'll have for Maryland already having film on this Cavaliers team and their sophomore quarterback.
It's always good to have experience or to have tape on somebody you went against last year. He's a great player, and, we have the utmost respect for him and their offense and their scheme. So we're just preparing for a hard-fought game, and we're preparing for a great atmosphere.
So that was Maryland linebacker Ruben Hyppolite talking about UVA and their preparation for the game on Saturday. So, Ryan, the team captains were announced. It's going to be Billy Edwards Jr., Dante Trader, and Tommy Akingbasote. So you got 2 guys on defense and 1, our star quarterback. Pretty good group.
Yeah, I'm highlighting that quarterback, though. Again, this is Billy Edwards. We didn't know if he'd be the starting quarterback. We had a feeling that it would be Edwards Jr. coming into the UConn game, but Mike Locksley was very tight-lipped about that. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, 2 performances from Edwards, and he's one of your team captains going into UVA. I like that sign. I like the continuity and the confidence that Locksley is putting into his quarterback in Edwards Jr. So you have him there. Trader, Akingbasote, as you mentioned, 3 good leaders going into UVA.
Now, when you talk about a score prediction, I'm going to say that mine is going to be 35-24. And I say that because I think ultimately Maryland is going to play with a little bit of fire.
With Maryland winning.
With Maryland winning.
Okay.
Yes.
You'll see why I say that in a second.
Okay. I think they're going to play with a little bit more fire. They're playing, a team that they play almost every year, a rival, and they're also going to – I think they're going to start out poorly on defense. I think it's going to take them just a little bit to adjust. Maybe Virginia hits them with the deep ball early, but then they kind of tame their offense down a little bit. But ultimately, I think the offense gets back to rolling against an ACC opponent. So 35-24, Maryland winning. That's my prediction. What's yours?
Who's your touchdown scorer first? Who scores a touchdown for Maryland? You got it right last week. You're 1 for 1 of the season. Daniel Stein looking the crystal ball. Why are you going 2 for 2 with who?
You know what? I'm going to say that Nolan Ray gets another touchdown.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to say. He got one in week 1. They kind of shut him down in week 2. But I think Coach Locks understands that he's a really good playmaker, and he's really giving Roman Hemby a run for his money on that RB1 spot. I don't think he quite has it yet, but I think he gets another touchdown in week 3.
I like Dylan Wade. Might have not been the first name to come to mind last week. It works out, so we'll do the same thing with Nolan Ray. He did have that big touchdown you mentioned against UConn there too. I think Ray is taking over this backfield a lot. I like what you're saying there. I like the Maryland prediction. But let me flip your running back and your score prediction. Give me UVA to win this game by a 42-34 margin. In Charlottesville, I think the Cavaliers will take care of business. Daniel, look at some of the game notes for Maryland. First line, big, bold, everything. Maryland's won 13 straight games against non-conference opponents. That's the most by any team not named the University of Georgia, who's over 20 with that statistic. I think that 13 straight non-conference winning streak for Maryland comes to an end against UVA. I do have the Cavaliers winning this one by 8. Give me Roman Hemby to score, though, for Maryland. I think if Maryland finds themselves down in a hole early against a Virginia team playing at home, I could see Maryland just trying to go back to basics, getting that running game going. I could see Roman Hemby being really featured. You look at some of the statistics from that loss to Michigan State. It was 12 carries for Hemby. I could see that well over 15 in a losing effort to Virginia. Give me Roman Hemby to score, but Maryland to still lose by 8 in a shootout. A lot of offense expected for this one.
I like how you're playing the odds like paradoxically. So you say Maryland has won 13 straight games, so they're going to lose this time. Yeah. But at the same time, you look at their game, UVA versus Maryland from last week. Yeah. Roman Hemby, he only had 25 yards on the ground, but he did have 2 touchdowns. So I see what you're doing there. I'm hoping for a Maryland win, but I could see that happen.
There was no Nolan Ray in the backfield last year when these two teams faced off.
That's true.
It's true freshman. So that'll do it for this second episode of Tackling the Terps. After the 27-24 loss, Maryland loses to Michigan State and ahead of Saturday's matchup against UVA. Daniel Stein here with us, Gibson Hurt in the back doing production. So on the nightcap between Maryland and Virginia, our guys Tyler Lochte and Jack Bowman will have you covered all the way on WMUC Sports. And we'll see you next week here on Tackling the Terps.